Thanks everybody for tuning into today's webinar. My name is Ruben Sussman, and I'm from the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. I also co-chair the BECC conference, and we're just gonna, while we're waiting for everybody to show up, I'd love to hear from you. Who's here? Let us know where you are in the world, maybe where you work, and why you're here. How do you interact with energy codes currently? Houston. Thanks, Nat. Nice to virtually see you. Who else is here? Please type into the chat. Go ahead and just write in the chat where you're from, what experience you have with energy codes. DC, got some Bay Area, California, energy consultant. Oh. Where else is everyone from? This is going to be an interactive workshop, so get your fingers ready to type Colorado and some experience with campus behavior change programs. Thanks, Lauren.
I hear Colorado's pretty hot today too.
Rhode Island, no experience with energy codes, but experience teaching behavior change for climate action. That's great. That's what we're all about at BECC. And thanks, Joanne. Great to see some folks from Boston. Richard is in local government, and he's an intern in Indiana, just getting started. That's great. All people from all over the spectrum here. So again, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy today's workshop. We're just waiting to get started. Yep. While we're waiting, please type into the chat where you're from, what your experience with energy codes is now, maybe what you're hoping to learn. So Delinda from, I'm going to mess up this, Petaluma, California.
Petaluma.
Obviously, I'm not from California. That's why I'm
near my hometown. I'm from Sebastopol, which is right next to Petaluma.
Thanks for tuning in, Delinda. Council member, excellent. So let's just give it another minute or so while we wait. Please type in why you're here, where you're from. Salem, Oregon, working on first climate action plan. Very good. Well, I hope that you do learn some, for those of you in government working on climate action plans, I hope you do learn some very actionable skills here. I think you'll find this quite relevant. Oh, sorry, I realized that I may not be sharing my screen in the appropriate manner. Let me just make sure I'm taking off this one annoying feature here. Here we go, now we're back. Rebecca in San Diego, so we got some great California representation. Richard's hoping to learn about how to improve energy efficiency for public and commercial buildings. Also interested in what needs to happen. Yes, very good for electric vehicles. And Guyang in Washington, DC, our nation's capital. Very close to where our tech assistants from Nick is from today. Yeah, I'm delighted that we are going to make this an interactive workshop. I think it's really important to have some interactivity, and I think folks are looking for connection nowadays. So thanks, Nat. Appreciate that. And Gallagly is in Denver, program coordinator. That's great. And Portland, Arlington. Roberto is in Europe. Wow, thanks for joining all the way from, I think you win the Furthest Person Away award, Roberto. Much appreciated. Energy markets and communities. And I noticed that Roberto says he can't hear me, but it seems as though others are not complaining about that. So Roberto, you might have some technical issues on your end. Nick, I'll ask Nick to look into that if he can. And we have Aaron from Boston, Amanda from Madison. This is fantastic. All right, we're now into the webinar time, and I don't want to eat too much more into this. So I'm going to just quickly give an introduction to myself and the webinar, and then turn it over to your workshop facilitator, Gina. So as I mentioned, my name is Ruben Sussman. I'm the director of the Behavior and Human Interventions Program at ACEEE, or the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. I also co-chair BECC. And of course, I'm very excited about BECC, as I always am. If you're interested, register now. Early bird rates are still available for a limited time. And again, it's virtual, so the rates are super low and very accessible this year. And very exciting, we haven't sent an email about this yet, but it's on the website. Our keynote speaker is now known, and it's going to be Michael Pollan. You may have heard of the book, An Omnivore's Dilemma. He's written that and many others. It's going to be a really interesting talk on the future of food. I also want to start by acknowledging and thanking our sponsors. National Grid, of course, the benefactor level, SoCal Gas, LA DWP, AEG, Department of Energy, Guidehouse, ADM, Prize, Illum, Energy Code ACE, and Guidehouse. Again, all of these make these webinars possible, these workshops possible, and the conference itself. So thank you very much. If you're yourself interested in becoming a sponsor, let me know. I can make that happen. Okay, so quickly, please remain muted unless you're speaking. We'll be using polls a couple times. So that's actually really easy. The questions just pop up and you just click, the answer and submit. If for some reason you accidentally close the poll question, you meant to answer it, you can just click the poll button that appears at the bottom of your screen. Want to speak up? Use the raise hand function. It's a little bit harder to find in Zoom than in other places, or in other programs, I should say. But you can find it if you click on the participants button at the bottom, and then you'll see a box come up. And at the bottom of that box, it says raise hand. Feel free to use that at any point, and then click it again to lower your hand once your question's been answered. And lastly, the chat features, excuse me, the chat feature is enabled. So talk with each other throughout the session. Type your questions in there at any time. Anything you want to ask myself or Gina, or you have any technical issues, just type it into the chat and we'll deal with that. So I'm very excited about today's workshop. Gina Rada is here to talk about changing behavior to support energy and carbon reduction through energy codes. And this is the California example that you can export to other areas. So next month's webinar is not yet announced, but you can check out becconference.org to learn about that and sign up when it's available. So thank you very much, Gina. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, great. Well, then I'm going to play around. Oops. That button disappeared on me all of a sudden, and share my screen. Are we? Sorry, it suddenly didn't ask me which screen I wanted to share. What are you guys seeing?
We're seeing your title slide there, energy code.
Oh, great. Then we're on the right screen. Excellent. Fantastic. It didn't ask me to pick, so I wasn't sure. Okay, so I'm here to talk about how California has really worked out over the many years that it's developed code, how to get, and I'll call them stakeholders, is what we do here, is the stakeholders in California that are associated with what I call the compliance chain, associated and integrated into code development, code implementation, and code understanding. So we are going to talk about how participation is a huge part of how code is developed in California. That enforcement is how we really rely on actually getting some of the actual realization of our goals accomplished. Education is a huge part of what we do here at Energy Code ACE in supporting the understanding and implementation of code, and that there's a large part of empowering with local governments. I saw Petaluma, someone from Petaluma was here from their city council. They are working currently on a REACH code, and that's where a city can go above and beyond what has been adopted as a state code. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about where there's some flexibility within code requirements and how they may apply to a local city's personal local goals. So one of the challenges we face, and there's many, but some of the ones I want to highlight is we're in a 3-year code cycle. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, we're used to a 3-year code cycle. We do that too. But we have some pretty aggressive goals on where we want to go with energy efficiency and environmental correction, shall I say. And each of our 3-year cycles, especially, has been moving towards some of California goals have been so big. They have been big shifts of change of behavior and changes of the ability of what you're going to be able to design and install. And California's had to work really hard on how to bring the stakeholders along with the process so we can accomplish what we'd like to do. And enforcement has to deal with just not energy and environmental building code requirements, but electrical, mechanical, structural, et cetera. There's so much they have on their plate that we're kind of straining a little bit the enforcement aspect of how our code applies because we built it into our building code here in California. So I'd like to start with how do we go about creating our codes? Well, the Energy Code was started in 1978. There was an oil embargo going on, and California wanted to look at reducing the reliance on outside oil and what can be done to really look at reducing our reliance on oil, and looked into putting into a code that, taking advantage of the 3-year code cycle, of which the Energy Code has to be more stringent with each code cycle starting in 1978. And the part I love about it is that there's aggressive studies that go into each code requirement has to show it's cost effective, that it's going to save enough energy to offset the cost of installing that particular building feature. And I like the fact that I'm saying this code is all about saving you money. And that really helps in terms of getting people on board and adopting what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We have some goals that have been set. Our 2020 goal, which was last year. It's just funny. I feel like just yesterday I was saying it'll be next year, it'll be 2020, but now we're 2021 already. And it was about trying to achieve zero net energy for all new residential construction. And we got really close to that. It's been pretty interesting to see what the residential construction industry has had to absorb, such as required PV systems and so forth, for us to meet those goals. But we also have added goals that we haven't had previously, and it's really looking at reducing carbon emissions and grid harmonization. How can we utilize the energy stored in buildings, stored in PV systems, stored in batteries, and also how to encourage buildings' use of energy either being produced or stored. So really looking at, from 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, how do we use and generate electricity? We have some big, bold strategies for non-residential buildings. We hit our residential goal. Now we're going towards 2030 for non-residential buildings, looking at a zero net energy use. And also we now start looking at our Clean Energy Acts, where we're starting to look at reducing energy sources that produce carbon. Then in 2045, the goal is that none of the energy that we pull from the grid will be produced with any carbon products. It'll all be renewable. And it's pretty interesting how our utilities have gotten to that goal even almost faster than what we planned on. They've met the 2030 goal now, and they're well on their way to the 2045 goal. And then environmentally, there are goals, this is with an assembly bill, that carbon emissions are to be reduced 80% below what they were in 1990. And I know there are many other local cities and climate action plans that would like to go beyond that, but these are examples of what we're doing at a state level. The California Public Utilities Commission is pretty much what's reining this all in and enabling it to happen by coordinating with energy, communications, rail, passenger and water uses here in California. And a lot of our energy and environmental goals touch on every single one of these. And they implement the Codes and Standards program, which I'll be talking about with you guys in this particular session. The CPUC did some pretty intense studies and looked at how do we engage change? How do we enact getting to where we want to be? And in part, it's innovators. So they're like, let's start with those who are like hey, we could save the planet. I have this great idea and I'm going to implement this great idea. And then we're going to have people who are going to adopt those innovative ideas. Then we're going to start getting more and more people going, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Did you hear what so-and-so did with their building over there? Then we start incentivizing. We start giving people money to really start thinking about transitioning towards these innovative ideas. And the last little bit is then, now let's turn it into a building code requirement in which now they have to do it. But you can see the bulk of the effort here in California is to get early adoption, to get people to buy into it versus being forced into it. Our code development process is very much publicly driven. In the 3 years between a code cycle, starting the day after a code goes into place, they're starting the next code. And they start putting out to the public, hey, do you have a great idea? Do you have something that you think is going to save the world that much faster? Then a lot of aggressive public meetings and stakeholder feedback is brought to the table with so many meetings. I don't know how many meetings I've been at in the last year as we're developing our next code cycle, because it was the public meeting getting everyone's feedback. We are now currently in the final rulemaking with our next code cycle that will go into play in 2023. And now things get really intense. Now we're starting to really talk about what words do we use. We start with ideas and we filter down to now the exact wording and enforceability options and requirements associated with future code requirements. A lot of this is done through the Codes and Standards Program advocacy, where they really concentrate on how can we advocate, how can we get those great ideas from the industry and turn them into action. This is one of my favorite websites about what California is looking at in terms of future and how all of the studies behind all these great ideas goes into action at title24stakeholders.com. And I love going there just to see the science behind many of the code requirements we have in California. So I have my first activity I would like to do with you guys. And what I want to do is I'd like you guys in the chat to give me an idea of what you think we can do as a code requirement that can get us towards zero net energy for non-residential buildings even faster. So what do you think as a code requirement can be done that enables California to get to their goals faster for non-residential buildings? What do you think would be a great idea? And for some reason, I can't see the chat, and I don't know why. There we go. The chat's over here. And, you know, start thinking, maybe start an idea, and others that are here in chat can help build on that idea. What do you think? And I had someone that was here coming to the table really wanting to look and feel what's going on for non-residential buildings. I have an office building. And with that office building, what do you think can be codified to allow us to meet the goals of zero net energy by 2030? I'm not having anyone have any ideas. Okay, and you're going to have to help me here. EB commissioning and MB commissioning. So I'm afraid I don't know what EB versus MB stands for in terms of commissioning. Oh, existing building commissioning and monitoring base. Thank you so much, Ann. So you're looking at, okay, let's look at how the building is functioning so that we can put into play things that can be tweaked or updated or revised in terms of operation of the building. I have require low carbon building materials. Expand on controlled outlets. I got to tell you, that is something that is being looked at right now for the next 2022 code cycle. Can they subscribe to some clean energy programs? That is something that is very much established here in California already. Code for high efficiency HVAC systems. There is this thing where states can't preempt above and beyond federal regulations for appliances, which includes HVAC systems. So there's this tricky political balance of how far do we push HVAC efficiency when we have preemption rules and laws that we have to take into consideration. Green roofs or solar PV requirements, I think that would be something that would be totally fantastic. All electric, no gas, energy storage mandates. That sounds like someone who already is in California is what I'm gonna guess. And by performance, I mean measured performance. Okay, so what I wanna do is take a few of these overall. Let's look at increasing efficiency requirements of our built-in mechanical systems. So that's one of our choices. Another choice is really looking at integrating commissioning as a required process and what happens to our buildings after that building permit has been approved. What do we do after we walked away and said we accomplished something, but now we're actually using the building? And then 3, how about we look at increased PV, photovoltaic, and battery storage, or how the building can utilize storing that energy that's being generated on site. So we have increased efficiency of mechanical systems, and we'll figure out how to deal with that with the federal level. I see what you're saying there. We have really looking at behavior and monitoring that and how that can enable us to function with the building better. Or 3, let's bring PV and storage to the building. Of those 3, which ones do you guys vote for? A is HVAC efficiency. Now you're voting. You're going to put in the chat what you're voting for, or we're going to put a poll up. Are we going to be able to put the poll up at all? Did we set one up for this first one?
We have only 2 options on the poll, so one moment.
Okay, 2. I forgot I only had 2 options. So I'm going to pick HVAC efficiencies and PV plus battery. So those are our 2. A is increase efficiencies associated with our systems of the building. B, and work out what's going to happen with the federal government. B is PV, battery, and really thinking about source energy and storing that energy being produced. What do you guys vote for as what we're going to look at to increase the ability for California to meet their zero net energy goals for non-residential buildings? And I'm going to let you guys know when we've had enough people vote to have a winner.
Looks like we have 81% voted.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
All right.
Okay, so we've got the majority of you voting for, let's really look at the efficiencies associated with the mechanical equipment integrated into the building associated with permit. And I'm going to make sure that we remember that, because we are going to keep working on that as we move through our content today. So remember that as we keep working through this. And thank you. Okay. So now let's talk about the enforcement associated with building codes and potentially what might be going on at the local level. So we depend upon the local authority having jurisdiction to enforce the codes that we have in play in California. And those are typically local building departments. It might be the Department of State architects if it's public school buildings. And it could be like with Indian reservations, they decide locally how much they want to adopt in terms of a state code. Because what's relatively unique for California is our building codes are adopted at a statewide level. Every single city, every single area in California is subject to the same requirements. Like Arizona, it's dependent upon city. And as I said earlier, it's a pretty big building code. There are 11 parts to the building code. Energy, which is part 6, is only one of them. And the environmental code, part 11, is that second part of it. And there is some kismet between the energy and environmental code. And I wanted to give you a feel of what is it that our energy code really actually codifies. So the envelope, those HVAC systems that we were talking about, water heating, lighting, electrical power, and there are currently some electrical power requirements for those outlets. And next code cycle, there's going to be some demand response flexibility measures associated with those controlled outlets. Pools and spas, renewable energy. The first time we saw renewable energy codified was in this current code cycle for residential buildings. We are seeing that renewable systems, including PV and battery, will be codified in our next code cycle that's being developed right now. And then the other thing we're really trying to capture here in California is process loads, the energy that is used to produce a product. So wineries, manufacturing plants, pot growing facilities, we're really going after that one in this next code cycle. So these are things that people are using potentially quite a bit of energy towards producing and working, and what can we do to codify that? And we also layer our code requirements. Mandatory are measures that are found to be cost effective, they're going to pay for themselves for every single place in California. And it's going to always pay for itself, whether it's a new construction project or you're altering an existing building. Across the board, it's going to pay for itself. So it's going to be mandatory. You have no choice. You're going to do this. No flexibility. We also have prescriptive measures that are dependent upon where you are in California. Are you where it's really hot all the time? Are you where it's really cold all the time? We have 16 climate zones in California. ASHRAE thinks we only have 2, but in California code development, we have 16. And now the requirements might only be required for me here in the Bay Area, but not you over there in Palm Desert. It's dependent upon what type of building. Is it non-residential? Is it residential? And scope of work. It's a lot less expensive to integrate energy and environmental efficiency measures when we're building for the very first time versus we are making changes to an existing building. So we see these measures change based on scope of work, location, and type of project. And again, we really look at new construction, we're going to ask you to do a lot versus an alteration, we're going to take into account, will it pay for itself? We also have a flexibility measure, and this allows design teams to think about the best way to look at energy and environmental efficiency associated with just their design, their building. And that's our performance approach. Most of the codes that are being developed are prescriptive. They're a laundry list. You're going to do this. That's what Washington has done. That is what New York has done. What makes California unique is the performance ability to use simulation software to simulate what your design is going to use in terms of energy and compare it against a baseline energy use. And are you equal or better than a baseline budget? So there's a lot of work that's done to provide flexibility that helps encourage adoption of these requirements. Our Cal Green Part 11 code, we look at vehicle charging, water conservation, environmental quality, moisture control, indoor air quality, environmental comfort. I saw someone put in there low carbon materials. This is where we talk about low carbon materials. We talk about getting products that are closer to the location so we're not shipping it. This is where all the vehicle charging requirements live, and they are getting very aggressive in our next code cycle of when car charging is to be made available to those who are residing at the building. We have some slightly different requirements for non-residential commercial buildings, and this is where a lot more of is that building in the right location? All of these look a lot like LEED. In fact, if you do work here in California, that preempts you for a block of LEED points because our environmental code looks so very similar to many of the requirements of the LEED program. In terms of code hierarchy for environmental code, they're all mandatory. And this is what a lot of people honestly have a lot of familiarity with, but to me, it's like, you have to do it, that's it. But also there are certain tiers, and this is where those local governments, let's say like Petaluma, might say, hey, we want to go more aggressive in terms of environmental savings in our area to meet our carbon goals. They can say, in my city, you have to do tier 1 in addition to mandatory, or you have to do tier 2 in addition to mandatory. So our second activity, so we decided our measure was going to be increased efficiency of systems, mechanical systems within the building. Do you think we should have those increased efficiencies as a mandatory measure across the board all the time? It will always pay for itself no matter what type of building or location it is, it's going to be effective? Or should it be prescriptive where, well, maybe we have different efficiency requirements for cooler climate zones versus hotter climate zones, and then it might look different based on scope of work. What do you guys want to do with our measure? Should it be mandatory or prescriptive in terms of higher efficiency requirements for mechanical systems? And Christina's asking, is commissioning requirements aligned? Yes, it is. The commissioning requirements are mandatory, by the way, and our requirements, you cannot trade them away. They only do apply, I have to tell you, to new construction, because it's all about what can we do to integrate into the commissioning process, meeting all of our pretty aggressive goals for California. And we don't have anything currently that goes past the building permit. Once they get their occupancy permit, the energy and environmental code in California walks away. And that's what happens when you build it into the building code. Because once that final inspection and occupancy permit has been provided, there's no more enforceability action associated with the building. So do we have a winner? Are we going to be a mandatory or a prescriptive measure?
Let's do a last call for voting. I'll give
Carolee
it
also,
10 more seconds.
sorry to
Okay.
interrupt. We also have another question from Carolee. What are considered scopes of work in this case?
So scope of work is it a brand new building? Or is it going to be in addition to an existing building? Or is it going to be an alteration, a complete remodel of an existing building? So scope of work is how much work am I doing? How much do I have the ability to interact and require certain things because you're building them?
So here's the results.
Okay, we're going to go prescriptive. I have to say, I think that's a good choice, guys, because we have so many different climate zones, our 16 climate zones. How well and effective mechanical efficiency requirements are really is dictated by how they're maintaining a comfortable temperature within their building. And not all mechanical systems work for all climate zones and to all building types. So good job, I think, and choosing to go prescriptive, because that also opens up the door for more flexibility in the performance approach. Mandatory measures, I have no flexibility in that performance simulation of the building. Prescriptive, I can do much better than and get credit for doing so much better than the prescriptive requirement. So I've enabled the ability to provide more adoption to this requirement because I'm giving them the ability to go beyond. I'm able to bring in early adopters by doing it that way. So that's a great idea. So what has California done to really help the stakeholders who are part of this energy and environmental code implementation? So this is all about implementation. So I'm here, of course, representing Energy Code ACE. So that's what I'm going to be talking about right now. And again, this is one of those code and standards program as is regulated by our California Public Utilities Commission. And this is the compliance improvement branch of it. We talked about advocacy a little bit earlier on. This is now about compliance improvement. And this is our ability, we are to teach people and to understand what the code requirements, how to implement them, and what their choices are to be able to show compliance. We have 3 buckets. We have tools that we have created. I have some tools here that are some of my favorites. Reference ACE is the code language and a bunch of things that have been written to support application of that code language. I have that at my fingertips with the Reference ACE tool. Product Finder, that is, we have a lot of certification requirements for insulation products, window products, HVAC products. This is how people can find the certification products and their databases to effectively show compliance. So many tools that are available. One of our newest is the Virtual Compliance Assistant, where it actually walks people through. You're designing an envelope. Let's walk through what the code requirements. What are you choosing as a design team? And I'm going to tell you whether that's going to meet your mandatory and prescriptive requirements of the code. So it helps spot on. We call it the TurboTax of the energy code, helping people understand how to apply it. We have so much training. We do a lot of all our classes, shock, are all virtual classes this last year. We did have many classes we did at local training centers, and we go to the building departments to do those trainings. We had to transition all of those to online in the last year. We are going to go back out in person again, probably next year. But we also have quite a few online self-studies and all sorts of different modalities. We have a YouTube channel you might want to check out. That's where our small recorded offerings are available that might be for a very specific topic. And then we have resources, printed material, though we encourage people don't print them. These are fact sheets of what do I need to know for the window requirements for an office building. Here's a fact sheet just on that one topic that you need to know. We have trigger sheets. This is alteration scope of work. I'm changing this, but nothing else. How does code apply? And all of the work that was put into the work we do in Energy Code ACE is all driven by needs assessment surveys. So we ask people, we go out, we just finished one. It took a year to do a needs assessment survey, talking to over 1,000 people of where are you having problems? Where do you need more help? What is what we're doing the right thing? So with our training, we find that people have two ways they go about interacting with the energy environmental code. They either hire someone that's what their specialty. I am a certified energy consultant. I've gone through a certification process that proves I really know what I'm doing. So they'll hire me because they want someone who really knows what they're doing. Or they might go, I can do this. I'm smart. I'm going to do it on my own. So we have all sorts of training that can help that user based on their needs. I'm an architect, I'm an engineer, I'm a contractor, I'm an inspector, help them accomplish their goals. Our tools are meant to actually get someone to find an answer that they're looking for. And I already told you about Reference ACE and the virtual compliance assistant. The Q&As are common questions that have been asked by the industry and the answers that have been developed. One of the things I love also about what we do in Energy Code ACE is everything is vetted by our Energy Commission, that governing body that is developing our energy and environmental codes. For other tools that I love in terms of helping people provide assistance, we have worked with the state to provide forms. I really hate forms, but what I like about a forms is they help you understand what does compliance look like and gives you feedback. Yeah, you're on track, you're complying. No, you're not on track. Go look here. You're having some issues, let's say, with your lighting controls. The virtual compliance assistant does that online, so it's walking people through their project, and they have supported that certified energy consulting program that I was talking about that's administered through CABEC, California Association of Building Energy Consultants. All sorts of resources, many of these geared towards the person who's doing the work. So we have checklists for plan checkers. We have checklists for building inspectors. We have fact sheets for manufacturers on products that they're allowed to sell here in California, because we have those rules too. And then this fact sheet here on top is what does residential lighting requirements look like when I just think about a single family home. Other tools that we have is supporting Title 20. So Title 20 is an arm of the Energy Commission that's all about the product that's being installed in the building. We've been talking about what you build into the building, but what you plug into the building. So Title 20 is the appliance efficiency requirements of California, such as certification requirements for mechanical systems, certification requirements for lighting products. And so there's a lot that's done to help support those who are manufacturing products to be sold in California, and those who are buying those products and installing them in buildings, understanding what these code requirements are. So we have another activity. Okay. Thinking about now we're adopting a prescriptive measure for mechanical efficiency, high efficiency requirements. Who do you think should be trained first? Where should we concentrate our efforts in providing support in terms of training, resources, and guidance for them to understand and implement this code we're developing? What do you guys think? Should we be training and helping architects, designers first, energy consultants, enforcement, contractors. Others I'd like to put, and others now that I know what we're choosing, mechanical engineers, who should be trained first on our prescriptive, high efficiency mechanical code requirement we're developing. And if you'd like to put in the chat why you picked what you did, I would love that also. Why do you think who you chose should be trained first? How can we engage more change? How can we realize our goals the best, faster, cleaner, etc., by who we're choosing to train first and give them support?
Let's give it another 30 seconds, I'll say.
Okay, great. Not seeing anyone put any of their whys into here. Okay, yeah, I do feel option E is engineers, is going to be mechanical engineers. If you say E, you're picking mechanical engineers. Okay, anyone want to explain why they picked what they did in the chat? Everyone's like, no, I don't want to explain why. And
Right,
architects, designers, often their struggle between what the engineers say they know is best, what the architects think should be there. Oh my gosh, I love that answer. I truly love that answer, Anne. Contractors, we can have the best designs in the world, but how are they actually being installed? I love that too. Fantastic. What did our poll say? Where did we decide as a consensus decision?
Here you go.
So consensus is architects, designers. I have to say here at Energy Code Ace, we might have gone after those mechanical engineers first to try and get them up to speed on what they should be bringing to the table. But I like what you guys are saying about architects, designers. They're the ones who are making these projects happen. They are the project managers. They have to make sure that what's being proposed. I had a project recently where they wanted to do split DX systems for a 5-story office building. That meant there were going to be 90 condenser units up on the roof, in addition to an open green space on the roof, in addition to PV up on the roof. How do you think the architect reacted to all of that? They have to make it happen. And so they actually ended up going with a variable refrigerant flow system that had only 10 outdoor units, enabling them to use the roof the way that was required by planning and by the desires of the client. So I love the fact that you guys chose the architect. I think that's excellent. So now we're going to talk about empowerment and what's been done through the Codes and Standards program as regulated by the CPUC in terms of above and beyond. So Codes and Standards program also has another arm beyond advocacy, beyond compliance improvement, called REACH codes. And REACH codes, like I was talking about for Petaluma, are where local cities and counties or any type of that authority having jurisdiction, they have their own area that they are in charge of, can choose to go beyond the state code requirements. Now, these can have many different flavors. They do have to go through a formal review and public adoption process. The public has to have the ability to have a say. I love the fact that our code development requirements here in California dictate that even at the local level, not just at the state level. And there's many different buckets they can choose from. Increased building efficiency, or more or greater, or just saying, hey, I want PV on all buildings and renewables. Really looking at electrification and where can we push things in terms of electrification and not using natural gas or reducing our reliance on natural gas. Saving water. I'm sorry, I think all of us can hear that message right now about how California, we're in the worst drought we've ever had, and we don't even know what it's going to look and feel like right now. We've been doing a lot of work through in our environmental code, the Cal Green Code, regarding energy savings, water savings. We have to do more. Local cities can really look and see what makes the most sense for their locality. Information disclosure. I had someone say earlier, hey, they think really looking at audits for existing buildings after buildings are being occupied, that can be adopted as a REACH code. It can't be adopted through the building code, but it can be adopted as a local REACH code. and then more work regarding process loads above and beyond where the code has gone already. We've seen a lot of REACH codes. We have over 85 cities in California that have adopted electrification REACH codes. In some cities, that means no natural gas is allowed to be attached to the building whatsoever. And in other buildings, they're saying, okay, if you want to use natural gas for your space heating or your water heating, your building efficiency now has to be 10% better. You have to use less if that's the energy source you want to use. There are a lot of cities that are requiring PV on non-res buildings. We don't have any PV requirements for non-res buildings in our current code. We will for our next code. So we also find that REACH codes allow cities and certain building types, as I like to say, reach towards future code requirements. It's transitioning. These are the early adopters that allow us to get somewhere better, faster, and with more people understanding it if we do it as a REACH code. So I wanted to share some of the success stories that we've had in California. So there, remember that goal we had in terms of California goals, AB 32, about California reaching carbon emission goals of 1990? Well, we've done that already. We are fallen below those levels of 1990 for the very first time. They peaked in 2004, but we are now below 1990 levels now. And we still have more we can go. We've met our goal early in terms of a dictated goal. Let's keep going. We have so much more that we can do. Other success story is how our power mix. Remember I said in 1978, the energy code started to prevent its reliance on outside oil. Well, in 1970, you can see oil, petroleum is a huge part of the mix of what was used to produce energy to put on the grid here in California. Now, as of 2018, it's down to zero. We have accomplished what we set out to do. It's pretty amazing. You do see that our natural gas portfolio is pretty much the same. And the big goal now, as we start moving towards 2050, is to start reducing that so that by 2050, that's also down to zero. And that our renewable portfolio, as you can see here, we've doing pretty good. Actually, if you look at an average of the utility providers here in California, we're at 35% of energy produced in California is done with renewable energy, whether that be PV, wind, or, I'm blanking on the word, water.
Hydro?
Thank you. On a day like that, I should be thinking I got my water glass right here, hydro. That's a large part of our portfolio, and it's going to get even bigger because we're meeting that 2050 goal of being all renewable. So that to me is a success story. When we also look at energy consumption, we see here California, we started tracking it about 1970 when the codes started going into effect. California's energy consumption, and this is electricity only, by the way, has stayed pretty steady. And that's because we're making our buildings more and more efficient. We're using less and less electricity. But I want you guys to think about, do you have more electric gadgets in your home now than you did in 1978? And the fact that we've been able to keep that consumption steady is, I think, a pretty amazing success story, especially when you see it compared to the rest of the United States. So where are we going for the future? So I thought I'd give you just a little bit of a hint of what's on the table for the 2022 code cycle that will go into play in 2023. PVs, as I said, currently PV is something that is part of what's required for residential homes. Now it's going to be required for a heck of a lot more buildings. I don't want to say all non-residential buildings. They're picking certain occupancies such as retail, such as office buildings. And when PV is required, also looking at and now install battery along with that PV system so that we can mitigate that grid harmonization. Heat pump technology is our future in terms of space heating and water heating. That's where we're trying to transition from natural gas with heat pump technology. Here in California, electricity is really expensive. You go to other states, electricity is really cheap. So electric resistance technology is a viable option for them. but it is not for us here in California and other states like New York, in which it takes an awful lot of electricity to produce 1 therm of heat when using electric resistance. It's incredibly efficient, but you just have to use so much of it to get the amount of heat you need. So that's why California has transitioned and is working into requiring heat pump technology for space heating and water heating for most building types in our next code cycle. We are going to be measuring more than just energy use. Right now we measure TDV, time dependent value. What time are you using your energy? So it's all about time of use over the course of the day, the week, the month, the year. Also dependent upon what climate zone. Are you that cooling climate zone or heating climate zone? And the value of the energy source being used. Natural gas, cheap. Electricity, expensive. Propane, freakishly expensive. And that changes the metrics under the hood in terms of our code requirements and their application. What we're going to be adding in our next code cycle is source energy. So it's going to be, for the very first time, source energy, what you can produce on site, is going to give a lot of value to a project. Things that you cannot produce on site, such as natural gas, are going to be getting a penalty. Our code to date, because it's been based on cost effectiveness, natural gas has always looked favorable because it's the least expensive energy source we have in California. Starting next code cycle, natural gas is not going to be looking as favorable whatsoever. It's going to be, hey, you want to make that source, you want to make that choice, and you're not going to really look at your source energy options. You're going to have to increase your building efficiency to be able to use it. It's going in line with what many REACH code cities are doing currently. Cal Green really is looking at expanding EV charging. I'd like to say on steroids. It's a big jump. It's going to be interesting what goes on there. And then that electrification, if you decide and you can get your project to work with natural gas for your heating needs and any of your appliances in the building, you must also be electric ready for a future heat pump technology choice in the future, because the best time and the cheapest time for us to get that into the building as an option is when it's being built for the first time. So there was some comments earlier about, you know, what are we doing to potentially mitigate using so much more electricity and how that is happening in terms of grid management. And that's why you'll see at the top of the list, we are codifying more on-site renewable, codifying more storage. Storage doesn't always have to be batteries. Storage is heat pump water heaters. It's an excellent way to store hot water. It doesn't lose any heat because it has no flue loss. It's a nice insulated pocket of hot water, and it's a great place to store energy. All those cars that we're adding to our buildings that are charging, those are storage devices. Having a super tight envelope and pre-cooling our buildings, setting that temperature a little bit lower than you want before you hit your time of use rates at 4 o'clock, you've stored cold air to keep your house or your building more comfortable. And because it's so tight, it's still going to be there later on in the day. So there's a lot that's being done to try and integrate that grid harmonization aspect into our future code. Roberto is saying the primary problem there here is energy balance of the networks. Yeah. And blackouts. Yeah. You don't have to talk about blackouts to anyone who lives in California, but that might be a highly political comment that we won't go to right now. But I understand the whole blackout situation. Texas has been there. It's as we rely more on our grid, the electric grid, we really have to be thinking about how we're designing and building to support that grid. So my next question for you guys is, what does your future like? Is there anything you'd like to share for us in the chat, or do feel free to raise your hand and unmute and tell us what's going on in your area? We have a few minutes left. Ruben, do you think a best use of our time as we're coming towards our last few minutes?
I think that's a fantastic use of time. I'd love to, for anybody who wants to unmute or type a question into the chat, and maybe even turn on your video. Feel free to have a little conversation here with the last couple of minutes, and then I'll wrap it up.
So Nat's asking, how should energy codes involve regulators, utilities, cost of service analysis, rate designers? I have to tell you that our code development process, that advocacy is all about that. And they're brought in early. They're brought in the minute we start thinking about our next code cycle. They are brought in and they are part of the body of people who help have a say, help have a impact. Can our utility grid support what might be offered up as a code requirement? And we also have to think of the legalities. Our particular code requirement we developed together today, we have to really think how that works with the preemption laws of the Department of Energy. And I'm not, if a code doesn't provide cost savings, I guess I'm not a great person to answer that, and it might be others, because that's part of why I love doing the work I do in California, because it's based on the cost savings. It's easy for me to sell it. It's easy for me to get adoption. It's easier for me to get people to understand, yeah, our energy code is really complex and aggressive, but look what the benefit is. The benefits built into the code requirement. Does anyone else have something they'd like to add to what Nate is saying? We have a silent group.
Gina, I had actually a question about that. Is it, it sounds as though you're saying that we should not do, not make requirements that are not cost effective. Can you think of any, or is there any time when maybe like there's something that might not be cost effective that's really important to do anyway?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's like I told you ahead of time, ask me this question. If I derail. We have pretty aggressive indoor air quality requirements in California. They're the most aggressive. They're more aggressive than ASHRAE 62.2 and ASHRAE 62.1. And we're even more aggressive in the 2022 code cycle, looking at kitchen hoods, and especially kitchen hoods that are over natural gas, burning appliances. There's no cost savings there. It's all about quality of life. It's all about safety. So there's quite a bit in our code when it comes to ventilation, when it comes to air quality, when it comes to how best to mitigate the impact of an indoor environment is pretty aggressive in our code. So there are times you have to go, cost effectiveness is fantastic, but health and safety is incredibly important also.
We have another question here from Anne. And actually, I think this is pertinent because we are the BECC audience, the BECC question. What is the challenge you've come up against in a way you were able to change minds and behavior to accomplish what you needed to happen?
I find the thing that happens to me on a daily basis is when my clients push back against that first-time cost associated with meeting the energy environmental code requirements, because they might have been looking at it as an investment. We're going to build this building and then sell it. So that first-time cost associated with complying with this code is above and beyond what we're willing to do in terms of budgetary reasons. And so it takes a lot to really then go, I get that you might not see the benefit of this, but whoever buys and or leases and rents this building afterwards over the next 25 years will. And that's what, Nate is saying, cost effectiveness for whom? Because that first time cost, if I immediately sell the building, I'm not living in the building, I don't get that cost effectiveness. It's more of a societal cost effectiveness and or that aspect of the usage of that building after that final occupancy permit has been provided. So I do want to make sure I say some of our code requirements, such as indoor air quality, kind of go outside of this cost effectiveness realm. And that's when really the societal cost becomes part of what is looked at in terms of, shall I say, cost effectiveness. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's health and safety in terms of what we're looking at. And it looks like we have a nice long one here. Nate's like, amazing typer. I'm wondering if he's doing a voice to speech thing, because I don't know how you're typing this fast. Everyone appreciates our diversity in the US. Significant portion of the country, whether it's states, counties, municipalities, seem reluctant to restrict behavior or adopt and enforce mandatory energy codes. Are there lessons learned about voluntary compliance that can enlighten? So this is where I was talking at the beginning, where the CPUC has, that was that chart that said we want to do innovators, early adopters, then we want to look at incentivizing before it comes a code requirement. And I would really look to that model of what's been done. There's a lot of work that's in the there is a paper that outlines that, available through the CPUC, of how the CPUC is regulating these programs that I've been talking to you about, to look at, let's incentivize first, let's get early adopters, let's do reach codes, let's give people money. Hey, we'll give you money to swap out your gas water heater. Before then, we then codify it, because then we have a lot of momentum behind us. Was I able to, did I answer that question?
Gina, with a minute left, well, or rather, I think we might be at
30
the
seconds.
hour. I just wanted to say thank you for hosting and facilitating this really informative session. And I realize both Jennifer and Nat have maybe unresolved questions here. And I'll be passing the names of the attendees over to you, Gina, so you can actually address these directly if you're interested. And you can always, of course, email Gina directly here at the email you see on the screen right now, as well as Jill Marver, or you can just check out the Energy Code Ace website. And I want to close by just reminding everybody that if you're interested in this nexus of energy and behavior, with a mix of not just academics, but also practitioners, people interested in all aspects of climate and energy, please check out the BECC conference. Early bird rates are out now. The agenda will be available shortly, hopefully. It will be available shortly. And our next webinar should be at the end of July 29th. Check out beccconference.org, and hopefully, thanks, Nat, much appreciated. We hope to see you there. And until then, take care, everybody, and be safe and healthy.